the chat. Got it. For questions during the Q&A. Okay, back to that part. And the candidate will have 20 minutes to speak. The next 30 minutes will be opened for questions to the audience. With that, I'd like to join Ana Del Rocio. Thank you for joining us. You have 20 minutes.
Thank you so much. My name is Ana Del Rocio. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm very happy to be joining you all today to talk a little bit about myself and my background and what I'm running for. Just to make sure everyone is on the same page, there's a special election happening on May 16th because the prior commissioner for the district, District 3 in Multnomah County, became the chair. So Chair Vega Peterson, who is also from East County, and there will be an election. I'm running for so many reasons that I'm happy to share about with you today, but I'll start with sharing a bit about my history, my family's history. So I'm the first person in my family to have been born in this country. My family fled here from Latin America in the 80s because of widespread violence, civil unrest, ultimately civil war. So much of my life has been really colored by this dynamic of being the living embodiment of what's at stake when government fails to protect its people, fails to keep communities together. There were a couple moments growing up in my life when I became acutely aware that the government was headed in a direction that was similar to what my family had been trying to flee back home. When I was in college, the Terminator became governor of California. After I became a mother, Trump became our president. And those were two key moments for me when I realized I need to be doing more. I need to be really showing up and giving more of my time, more of my service. I had already been an organizer in community, already been very much accountable to community, but there was an opportunity to serve at a bigger level. And that public service calling never really truly has gone away. I ran and served before in East County on the David Douglas School Board. There was a majority minority school district that had never elected someone like me to represent the students and families in that district. So that was a monumental experience on the heels of Trump's election for all communities to come together and show what we can do and what's possible when we fight back against leadership that is oppressive, leadership that is not aligned with what's good for families and communities. I believe that housing is a human right. So much of what undergirds why I'm running. I believe that we have really lost out on that human element, that piece that is going to impact generations to come when families are allowed to be stable, when communities are allowed to stay rooted. That is what is going to allow our local economy to thrive in multi-generational ways. So here in the region, I have been really a Multnomah County specific leader since 2015, preceding really any current sitting Multnomah County Commissioner's tenure on that body. I co-founded the first Budget Advisory Committee for the Multnomah County Health Department, the largest department, through which we really worked to preserve important, impactful programs in the community preventing youth violence, teen dating violence. I went on to work for Commissioner Vega Peterson herself for 3 years, both in the state legislature and at the county commission, and also co-chair the once per decade Multnomah County Charter Review Committee. So I am really very much embedded in the county because the county is the heart of our government. It's often overlooked. It doesn't get as much press or attention as the city or the state. But when you think about our day-to-day lives, not just housing, but clinics, libraries, summer programs, after-school programs for children and families, a lot of people know the county as the safety net. That's where people go when they're, in a difficult time in their life. A lot of people who are just as involved know the county for that reason. It might be lesser known to the public at large, but for our communities, it's a bit more well known because it is a safety net. And that's why it's been so important for me as a single parent, as a renter, a daughter of immigrants, to get involved at this specific level of government, because these human services and our local public health authority is where we stand to make a great impact on people's day-to-day well-being, day-to-day lives. I'm a renter, as I mentioned before. I'll expand on that a little bit because it's important for our purposes today. I just less than a week ago received a rent increase notice of $209. I'm going to have to figure out balancing childcare, tuition. I'm also currently a grad student in the #1 nationally ranked program for dispute resolution in the country, with food prices that are going up and my rent increase. That is coming at a time where we are seeing resistance to important rent control legislation. We are seeing really a profit-motivated pushback on what it is to protect people's ability to remain housed and prevent the homelessness and unhoused problem from getting that much worse. We know that there are places, for example, New York and LA, where we have a couple things coexisting. We have really strong renter protections, or at least better than we have here, and we have thriving economies. So that argument is false, that if we protect renters, we're going to somehow have development halt and we're going to stymie our ability to recover from the pandemic. That's not true, and I live that truth as a representation of what it is to be a tenant who's facing these issues day to day in real time. I'm a symbol of the fact that people are being harmed in real time, and we're not talking about a theoretical, hypothetical, maybe in the future development will be harmed. People are being harmed now, and that is the piece we're missing on the county commission, that renters piece, that transit rider piece, the opinion and the point of view that comes from lived experience and not just theory, not just what we're hearing about from lobbyists who represent profit-motivated interests. My children attend public schools. They are in a dual immersion program. It's so important for me to be able to model to them what it is to get involved, what it is to be a mother and someone who also is a community servant, a public official. They are having a blast on the campaign trail. My older son remembers when he knocked doors with me on the David Douglas campaign. We're really excited to get ramped up now on this phase of the campaign, because my campaign is people powered. That's a part of how I've been a leader in this region and throughout my life, is to involve community and be someone who goes and seeks input from voices from a diversity of perspectives. What distinguishes me in this race as a candidate is that my endorsements are a representation of how people view me as a leader, as someone who is inclusive, someone who is fair, someone who is diplomatic. And we're missing that critical piece, especially on the housing front, collaborating across jurisdictions between city, county, regional. These are regional problems that require regional solutions, and I'm the leader that has established a record of bringing people together across differences to work on common ground. That common ground will be essential, not just for housing and homelessness, but for other issues for which there is no jurisdiction. Gun violence, for example, has no jurisdiction. We need to make sure that we're getting all hands on deck, all hands involved to save lives. Community safety. We have massive accountability issues in our criminal justice system. We need to make sure that we are keeping people safe, but also not causing more harm. We need to make sure that we are taking a look at our county functions that are democracy promoting, elections, for example, and make sure that we keep doors open for more voices and more input. That type of breadth of leadership is what I offer to constituents and what I offer to voters. It is what will set me apart for the future of Multnomah County, looking forward and looking ahead several generations. It's not enough for us to end homelessness, and that is the goal. That's what we're working for. For our communities to thrive and prosper, we want more than that. That's much too low a bar. We want thriving cultural scenes. We want thriving small businesses. We want to have children that have access to a diversity of enrichment programs and after school and summer programs. We see so much more for ourselves in East Portland, the historically neglected portion of the county, than simply getting basic human needs met. So while I am very much attuned to the top 3 issues that voters are telling me are concerning to them, mental health and addiction treatment, housing and homelessness, community safety, I'm also raising the bar and saying in East Portland, we want and deserve more. We are dealing with a history and a record of being underinvested in, divested from, and it's showing. We in East Portland have been facing many of the crises that are in the headlines today for decades. And now that they're more perceived, more visible in other places, there's greater attention to that, but that doesn't take away that we have been, in so many ways, ringing the alarm, because we are the folks who are living day to day the actual experiences in my very diverse working class district in East Portland. I have, in the past couple of months that I've been on the campaign trail, heard from so many people, so many perspectives. I really want to make time to hear from all of you, your ideas, your priorities, your county specific interests, your questions. I would love to answer and spend time, really deep diving on, because my endorsements, my resume, my lived experience, I believe speak for themselves. I'm the best candidate for the job and the clear progressive choice. And I want to hand time over to you all, because your input is what we have been missing from the county commission in terms of equitable influence. And I want to make sure that I really understand where you're coming from and take that with me to the commission, take it with me to my constituents.
Thank you, Ms. Del Rocio. Now we would like to open up for questions and answers. Please enter your question into the chat or raise your hand virtually. We will unmute you. Okay, Wanda McNeely from YMCA asked, what do you see as the biggest need in our city right now? And what do you want to do to fill that need?
In our city, so just in the city of Portland?
Wanda, is that the city of Portland? Yes.
Multnomah County has a variety of different cities in it. I'll assume it's Portland unless I'm told otherwise. Within Portland, we're part of the nation when it comes to facing the housing and homelessness crisis, unaffordable housing, displacement, making sure that we're providing safe shelter for everyone at night. We're part of the nation by way on that. When it comes to specifically what has been our set of unique issues for decades, mental health and substance abuse has been a hotspot here in the Pacific Northwest for a while. So it's the convergence of those two things that right now I believe makes up the highest priority issue in need of immediate attention, and attention that it combines and balances short-term with long-term. We want to get at the root causes. We want to get at, what are the specific environmental, material, social factors that are creating such a high mental health, poor outcomes in mental health and addictions in this region? And then what are the immediate short-term needs that we can implement to change lives? So getting people sheltered, I've heard from a lot of folks with disabilities, folks that are gender diverse, that there's simply not place for them in the shelter system, that they don't have a place where they can go to feel safe. We need to make sure that people can be routed to places where they can actually feel comfortable and feel safe in comparison to other options, which is sleeping on the street. So that 7,000 plus folks that we have on the street any given night, that is a humanitarian crisis. That is a failure of policy. We must get people to safety immediately, but we must also be building long-term so that folks have options that can be permanent and supportive for them, given whatever need they have that has contributed to them being unhoused or homeless to begin with. We need specific populations targeted, for example, students, seniors, people with disabilities, people who don't speak English. We need a much more differentiation in our approach to these populations. And then on the mental health and addictions treatment front, we have a behavioral health workforce shortage that we need to address. We must diversify the pipelines to that kind of field. We need to expand our traditional one-to-one model of treatment to really incorporate research-backed community and cultural group-based practices. We need to make sure that there are enough treatment beds for all. There are so many things that we can do to really attack that convergence. I think those two go together when it comes to what we're looking at in the unhoused and homeless population, and when we're looking at in terms of folks who are experiencing mental health crises and addictions. We have to attack them together. So I'll say that's true for Portland, it's true for other cities as well, but for the county, our lane there will be on the behavioral health front. We are the local public health authority, so ensuring that we are tackling that behavioral health workforce shortage will be key. I know there's a new program in the works with PSU, a human services program, to really make sure that we're getting more folks funneled into these careers. I have experience juggling a similar situation on the school board where we lacked for teachers of color. I know what it is to open up conversations outside of Oregon, create pipelines, build a workforce immediately to address an immediate need.
Thank you. Next question, what makes you stand out from other candidates in the running?
I'm the only candidate with directly relevant Multnomah County experience. I don't believe that apparel manufacturing experience or corporate lobbying experience can prepare one to tackle the life and death issues of Multnomah County. I have worked on the Oregon Maternal Mortality and Morbidity Review Committee. I understand that there are several important public health. We saw it in COVID, right? When you're having the county respond to immediate emergency public health needs, to emergency weather needs, to emergency housing needs, you need people who know how the county works. I've worked in the county, I know it inside and out. I've worked at the governance level, I've worked at the staff level, I've worked at the volunteer and public official level. This is a unique animal. This is unlike the city government, this is unlike the state government. To be able to work collaboratively with other commissioners, to be able to work collaboratively with the chair and with regional leaders are all necessary to be effective in this position. You need to be able to bring folks along. I'm the only candidate that has a track record of doing that, and specifically at Multnomah County.
Thank you. Next question. What do you plan to do to impact climate change and protect the environment if elected? Please be specific with things you will initiate and champion. Thanks.
I've had wonderful conversations with John Marchtinsky at the Office of Sustainability and also with the current chair about Multnomah County currently where it stands as a leader on climate change and a leader on climate resilience. I'm proud of that, but that doesn't mean that there's so much more work left to do and to really lean into that leadership and influence our surrounding regions and jurisdictions, really be able to uplift other counties, other places that are interested in trying programs that we've tried. We have on the air quality front a lot of work to do, a lot of initiatives to really defend in East Portland when it comes to worsening air quality impacts. I grew up off of a freeway exit in the Bay Area in California, and I had terrible asthma as a child. When I moved away, the asthma was gone. So I know that there are so many times in my memory where my family was in the hospital, taking time off of school, off of work because of my asthma, just really wanting to get that under control, knowing that we have a lot of populations that are disproportionately impacted by bad air quality. The county is uniquely positioned, again, as a local public health authority to take on air quality, to take on monitoring. One of the things I'm learning from Neighbors for Clean Air, for example, is that we have an inequitable method to even collect and report out data on how our air quality is varying across the county. We have many more sets of data from the western side of the county, but we lack that on the eastern side in my district. And how are we going to make sure that we're making progress on air quality, that we're holding bad actors accountable for air pollution without even being able to track what's going on in real time? So the county can play a role in making sure that we have air quality monitors where we need them. We can make sure that we are creating necessary standards, necessary bans and requirements to make sure our air quality is as clean as we need it to be, especially around schools, especially around senior centers, really taking a targeted approach and working in a way that is responsive to what community are telling us their needs are. In addition to air quality, we have a lot to do in terms of climate resilience. So when we see these heat, spikes, when we see these, really cold winter storms, the county is able to come in and step in and help people be able to be a bit more resilient by handing out equipment like heat pumps, handing out air conditioners, water. There's so many things that the county can do to save lives, and that's our role, is to come in and save lives in these kinds of emergencies. Definitely invest long-term in mitigating climate change, but in the immediacy, how do we get people safe when these climate disasters hit? So those are a couple, and I'm definitely happy to talk offline about other things that we can work on at the county.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to Linda, then I'm going to go to Marsh, and then I'm going to go to Laura, and then I'll answer. Then we'll do Andy. Linda King, United Way of the Columbia Willamette. We are all aware of the housing crisis in our region. What are some of the current or future initiatives you feel might have the greatest impact to address homelessness? And what areas of innovation will you focus on to break the status quo approach to ending this crisis?
Thank you. That's what I would really love to chat with all of you about today. Love to hear your thoughts on it. What do you think? And how can I make sure that that's uplifted at the county? What I understand is that we need a lot more protections for renters. We need a lot more affordability in housing. We can think about, housing supply long-term and think about, keeping people housed and preventing evictions short-term, but really wages aren't where they need to be to match, what housing affordability is set at and how it's waxing and waning. We need to look long-term at that. I believe that even though the county is, technically a giant service provider, we have an obligation to see many of our functions working themselves out of a job. If we have living conditions across the board, day-to-day material conditions that are humane, that are dignified, the demand for many of the services we provide, for example, like rent assistance, is going to go down. So I do think the county has a role to play in preventing evictions and making sure that we're, supporting know your rights efforts for groups or tenant groups. But we also have an obligation to make sure that people have access to what we need for self-sufficiency, for what we need to support our own families, through pathways to family wage jobs, really getting at that fabric of what it is to be a thriving district and thriving society that can afford places to live. Preventing displacement is key. I was just at a Division Midway Alliance community visioning workshop, and one of the things that one of my neighbors said that stuck in my mind is, he said, 20 years from now, we just want to still be living here. And that struck me because it is simple, it is searing in its truth, that what we want is to create roots for our communities, for our children, for our grandchildren. We know that community is a protective factor. It's a social determinant of health. Where we see a reduction in poverty and addiction, we also see thriving community networks, a thriving, cohesive social structural support system. When we prevent displacement, we will allow communities to really build that for ourselves. So I would really want to work on specific policies that come to my attention from you all, from people who are on the ground working with, tenants and providers and owners. I want to know what are some specific interventions that we've tried recently that are working or not working. With my rent increase notice, I know I didn't get that relocation notice. So there, some things that are still working and not working. I want to try everything that we can, and I want to make sure where we need to pivot. And really that joint office is going to need a lot of support. We have a regional collaborative, also a recently off the ground regional collaborative on housing and homelessness specifically, that it will be my role as county commissioner to attend and give input on. I want to be advancing East County specific interventions that take into account displacement of communities of color, immigrant communities, take into account the need for linguistically and culturally appropriate services. That's always going to be essential, and a county is not currently equipped to actually meet the language justice needs of our communities. So I am really open to hearing from you all. What are your top 3 legislative priorities? A lot of people know how to lobby at the state level. The county is still, the lesser attended to jurisdiction. Tell me what it is that you're wanting to see, program-wise, initiative-wise. Our budget cycle is currently open. Do you have any ideas on, notes or amendments you'd like to see there? I see you all as a group of experts and leaders here, and I want to take your input and make sure that I'm raising it to the commission and to the chair.
Thank you. The next question would be Marsh Santoro. I hope I said that right.
Yes, you did. So, yes, Marsh Santoro here. I'm a tenant leader, among some other things. One of the things I want to ask you about, you're talking about the different committees you want to get together. I believe you come from lived experience. So this is a good thing. I like this. You being from lived experience and you're wanting these other committees to come about, I would like to ask you, are you going to populate these committees with people of lived experience? I believe that we need to bring people, homelessness people with lived experience to the table. They're the people who know what we need and what is needed, what we need exactly, what is needed to end homelessness. In reality, we don't need people who already have homes, who live in big mansions, who are in middle class or even above middle class. We need the people who are in low income to be sitting at those tables telling you what the services should be, how they should work, and who they should go to.
That's right. Absolutely. The short answer is yes. I very much believe that we need lived experience at the table to strengthen the quality of our decision making, the quality of our budgets and our policies. It's essential to understand when someone is living through the realities of systems that we're trying to fix or address, they're best positioned to be able to provide input on what's going to work or not going to work. What's just, an idea that will fail to launch, what's an idea that is not culturally accessible. When we have a diversity of experiences at the table, lived experiences, you match it with the professional resources that county staff are able to provide, we can really amplify the impact of what we're trying to design and experiment with. And I value lived experience as a tool to be able to gain knowledge, as a way of knowing, right? I think that our own experiences, when we pair them up with others and see where their patterns, where their trends, it can be tremendously healing as well to realize, okay, you know what happened to me is not my fault. It's not a character flaw. I didn't do anything wrong. There are truly systems and structures set up that are not inclusive of our experiences and our needs. And when we speak up and say, I have this and that experience with this and that agency, this form, this phone call, we are able to inform the development of a system that actually is going to help meet people where they are at and give people an access point to reaching support that is more dignified, really honors people's humanity, doesn't require people to feel that they are in any way, not don't have belonging or don't have a space in our society to have a say. It's empowering. So yes, it is part of how I have operated in the past. I was actually not proud of this necessarily, but when I was elected, there was no racial justice subcommittee on the David Douglas School Board at the board level. This is the majority minority school district, one of the most diverse multilingual districts in the whole state, and there had yet been a convening of folks to target the specific issue of educational injustice from a race-based perspective. So I convened that and populated it with education organizers from Unite Oregon and students and teachers and staff, really made sure it was a robust group of people that had a perspective that was going to contribute to the best, most robust possible next step and solution forward. So thank you, Marsha. I really appreciate that. Absolutely, I value lived experience.
It also empowers people and uplifts people, and which is really important to those of us that are low income or to the people that are homeless or displaced. Once you empower them and uplift them, it does more for them also, and it makes them even more excited about what they're doing.
Absolutely. It's humanizing, right? To say, hey, you have an experience that is valid. And to bring it to the table right alongside, people who are maybe, in suits and have all these types of degrees, your experience is also valid. It is, it's a great thing to do.
Thank you. Next question, Laura Golino Del Lovato. Did I say that right?
Pretty good, Golino De Lovato. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Ana. I'm Laura Golino De Lovato. I'm the Executive Director, Northwest Pilot Project. We work with low-income older adults in Multnomah County to find housing that they can afford to live in. Really appreciate you being here. I was glad that you mentioned the joint office. We are full transparency. We're a contractor with the joint office. And I am very interested in getting your input about a challenge that our organization and many of my colleagues who are also contractors are facing when it comes to delivering the most and the best quality service that we can provide with the financial resources that are available to us. And that is the compensation issue and the wage inadequacy, I guess. So the issue around the need for higher wages for direct service workers, for people who are going out and doing outreach, case management, retention work, wellness in the social service nonprofit sector, and how that ties with funding that the Joint Office has and could make available. So I'm very curious about how you would approach the issue around compensation and the clearly identified need that we've stated for better compensation that allows us to be competitive and get fully staffed as we do this important work every day. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yes, I believe the county needs to live its values internally as we live our values externally. And that means creating pathways to good paying jobs, creating partnerships with providers that permit that to happen. We need to put our money where our mouth is when we're wanting to address this behavioral health workforce shortage, but if we're not willing to invest in, jobs that pay adequately, that's not going to contribute to that solution that we want to see. We need to do both things. We need to make sure that those wages are competitive. We need to also make sure that the workforce, the numbers are there, because we're going to keep seeing, people turning over, leaving the field, leaving the profession, if their caseloads are too high and acuity is too high, and we don't have enough backup in terms of the numbers of people needed to actually serve the need. So that combination of things will be important to address. Compensation, but also I'm hearing in terms of cash flow and making sure that our process is sped up. I know these payments can take a very long time to go through. I've heard that repeatedly from a lot of contractors, and that's something on my radar, particularly for the smaller organizations that may not have as built out infrastructure, may not have the ability to really handle such a long delay or runway of payment, we're going to need to make sure that we're addressing that specifically. There's a reason that we contract with providers like yourself. We contract because we know that you are all best positioned to serve your unique community and population. You are the experts. There's no better way to do the job than through that. So doing that in a way that allows you to offer competitive wages, partners with you in solving the behavioral workforce shortage, and lives our values internally as we do externally. I've been dismayed to know that there's so many county workers and contracted workers who are just a hair away from being eligible for county services themselves. How are we going to contribute to the long-term betterment, like I said, uplifting material conditions, preventing the need for rental assistance down the road if we're not creating jobs that are keeping up with what it is to, what the need is to raise a family in Multnomah County in 2023 and beyond. So I would love to partner with you more and learn more about that. I know the Joint Office has been dealing with some leadership challenges and, really making sure that we're supporting the next leader for that office to stay and do a good job and build healthy partnerships with surrounding, providers will be essential. But I do see between the Joint Office and many other recent, new initiatives at the county, there's a lot that the commission can do to have a say now as things are being built out, processes, procedures, protocols are being built out now for new leadership, and to set the stage and set the precedent for future contractor relations with the Joint Office.
Thank you, Ana.
Thank you. Next question. What is your vision for an equitable East Portland? And what will you do as county commissioner to make that vision a reality?
Thank you, Andy. I have such a vibrant vision. I envision a lot of green. I see a lot of trees. I see a lot of children playing and running. I see safe streets, buses, multimodal transportation, clean air, access to schools and cultural centers. It was so funny at the Division Midway Alliance, people were sharing their visions, and it was so uplifting how cultural and arts-based it was. People said, we want a senior center where we can do karaoke. Yes, that's amazing. Let's do that. Those cultural and arts outlets that really make the difference between surviving and thriving are part of what I see in my vision for East Portland overall. What I can do to make that happen, I'm running for office to make sure that we're representing people who live in these districts who have historically been disconnected from these parts of thriving. When I used to live in New York, I had more access to green space than I do now living in Oregon, this rainforest, because the way that our infrastructure is set up, going to the parks, it's not easy. When I lived in Hazelwood, I had to cross Stark to take my younger child to preschool where there was no crosswalk. There's just really a lack of thoughtful structure and design of how our streets work, how our sidewalks work here in East Portland. I'm someone who is, coming from those communities, knows what it is to try to take their kids to work, try to breathe, unhealthy air, try to make ends meet, paying rent. Building political power and electoral power for our communities is part of my vision, is part of why I'm running. We are often the site of, for example, this Prologis project out in outer East Portland, threatening our air quality yet again. We're often the site of these kinds of efforts because we're perceived as the area of the county with lesser power to be able to fight back. When I'm elected and we have 3 commissioners representing East Portland on the Multnomah County Commissioner, between myself, the chair, and Commissioner Stegman, we're going to be able to finally balance out what it has been to have decades of historical underappreciation of East Portland, underinvestment in East Portland. My part of the solution is to speak up, have my voice heard, have our communities empowered through my office, through my leadership, to be building towards that vision of thriving, not just making sure everyone's not hungry and housed. Those are essential, but definitely not good enough. We want to be thriving. We want to be secure, economically secure, healthy, physically, emotionally, behaviorally healthy. We want to be able to have our families, have a rooted place, a rooted home for generations at a time, affordability. I'm a part of the group of folks who are much more childcare burdened than we are rent burdened. We have childcare deserts in every county in this state right now. And how are women supposed to get to work and supposed to save for retirement and deposit on a home when it taxes us? We're taxed to work so much. So being able to solve that basic economic security function for our providers, our breadwinners, our caretakers in our community will go so far for so long. So there's so much more, but I would love to keep hearing from you all about what you envision for your communities in East Portland and make sure that it's part of our collective vision together.
Thank you. So we're going to take a question from Shay, then we're going to go to Mark, and then we're going to go to Sahan. So the question from Shay Smith from our Just Future asks, what policies do you plan to implement or expand in efforts to reduce the amount of homelessness in our community?
We need to start with making sure that we're protecting our folks who are unhoused from attempts to criminalize poverty and criminalize unhoused, unsheltered homelessness. It's so important to make sure that we're coming at these problems with compassion at the forefront and, you know, dignity at the forefront. Pathways to immediate shelter are essential. Making sure that we're preventing evictions is essential. I understand the county already does that and has been doing that more so recently because of COVID and recent federal support that has come in for that work, but we need to be doing that really in a more significant way. There are a bunch of pilot programs that I'm interested in seeing kind of how they're performing and outcomes, you know, that target populations, specifically geographic, cultural populations, just looking at preventing the pipeline, the inflow of homelessness and unsheltered houselessness to begin with. Making sure that we have providers to meet immediate mental health, trauma, and substance abuse needs is essential. Having outreach conducted that is highly skilled to be able to understand, okay, when these point in time counts happen or when we're doing these interviews, are we really getting the information that we need about what kinds of services, what kinds of conditions people are living with, existing health conditions, disabilities, languages, making sure that we have treatment beds available and that we're able to funnel people from unhoused to, if it's a temporary shelter or not, to permanent supportive housing, and then tracking that people are able to stay permanently housed and not cycling through this churn. Being able to identify where the cracks in the system currently are. I understand there is some progress happening on that front now with the chair's data task force to really understand and create a dashboard type of visualization of how folks are running through the system from that maybe they have a lease and then their rent gets increased and they're on the streets or sleeping in their car and then they go to a show, you know, really understanding what that cycle looks like. When we understand it, we're able to prevent and design interventions and say, okay, we'll meet you here or there to make sure that you stay housed, you and your family, you know, near your school, your place of work, your house of worship, really integrating that into the community and fending off a lot of attacks on these populations that would seek to criminalize, that would seek to even if not create criminalized encampments, just straight send people to jail. That has been something that I have heard as a possible solution, a viable solution from far too many constituents. And that does not seem to be anywhere near the type of values that we hold at, you know, in Multnomah County and as Oregonians. But what that is, you know, when people feel threatened or unsafe, it's that freeze response. When you think of that fight, flight, freeze response, that freeze, that's what it is to send people away from where we can see them, but that's not fighting. I want us to fight, actually fight to make sure that we have real, honest solutions that address the root cause and the root underlying need of why someone doesn't have a roof overhead. But it will take work. It will take working with the leadership at the joint office that Andy just shared in the chat to make sure that we're all in alignment to really build this shared approach and shared value, because I'm seeing too many disturbing plans, initiatives, concepts that just simply assume that there is a significant enough set of people in this county that would support criminalizing homelessness. And I know that we can fight back, truly fight back, and not just freeze the situation and end up with a worse problem than when we started.
Thank you. Mark Del Hago, I hope I said that right, has his hand up.
All right, thank you. Mark Hidalgo.
Hi.
Thank you, Ana, for addressing and sharing this with us. I've worked actually currently, I used to work with Impact Northwest. I recently separated, but
Okay.
I'm a mental health care counselor. I've worked on assertive community treatment. A lot of my clients were homeless, et cetera. First and foremost, I'll make my statements. I'm very unhappy with the Joint Office of Homelessness, especially with individuals in their positions, that we've had little progress. Another statement that I will make that is concerning is that in 2019, legislators requested $200 million that they just passed. That's a bond of debt that us as taxpayers will pay, plus the debt, the interest, et cetera. So during the pandemic, where did the $200 million go? And then when we have a newly elected governor, she's requesting 130 more million to address homelessness. I was hoping and gonna, not to put you on the spot, but to ask you, if we're gonna fight, are you going to be persistent to ask for the clarification and transparency of where these funds are going?
Absolutely, yes. I was honored to earn the endorsement of former Clackamas County Finance Officer and past president of the Government Finance Officers Association, who I co-chaired the recent county charter review committee with, because he knows how much accountability and transparency matter to me and how much I'm looking at these budgets and these expense reports closely and wanting to make sure that we are stewarding taxpayer dollars as best we can. I've heard from several people those concerns about where did that money go? How's it being spent? How's it being used? If we're not able to show and demonstrate our progress on a regular basis, how are we ever going to build trust with community, build trust with stakeholders? It's essential as we continue to innovate, to create new programs, that we're circling back frequently, early and often, with folks about this is what has worked, this is what has not worked. Without that happening, I think that it's been difficult to get more buy-in for other initiatives. But I will say everything I'm hearing so far from the past quarter about Chair Vega Peterson's leadership has been that she is inhabiting the role a bit differently and creating more opportunities for that transparency, that accountability with taxpayers than there had been previously. So that bodes well for me. I know that going in there, I'll be able to support that effort to make sure that gets expanded to other, parts of the county's work, not just housing and homelessness, but also preschool for all. Go ahead.
I was going to say thank you for that. And when you get this election, I'm going to be knocking on your door to collaborate. All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Sahan, how are you? You have the next question. You're muted.
I guess I should unmute before I start talking. Not just lower my hands. That doesn't do the trick. Well, thank you, Francis, and thank you, Ana, so much for being here in this space. I really appreciate, I think, all of the answers you give it so far, but I was expecting that. I was expecting to appreciate all of the answers that you were going to give in this forum. But I also do not anticipate that there will be consensus on the council with all of the thoughts and values that you shared in this space. So why don't you just ask about what will your, not necessarily your approach, but what will your methodology, what is your process going to be in terms of uplifting your advocacy, potentially advocating aggressively to change opinions, but to do some consensus building to shift some of the county leadership to your position on some of the things that you're sharing with us today. I know that this is probably just part of the election cycle timeline that we're in right now, but I've heard more than I want to hear from some of our commissioners. The chair has power, I don't have power. And I don't agree with that. I think all of our commissioners have a high level of power and are able to do a level of advocacy that can make a difference. So just wanted to hear some of your, not thoughts, because I know they're going to be, your thoughts are going to be great, but what's your approach going to be? What's your methodology going to be in shifting some of that leadership thought towards the values that you're expressing today?
Thank you, Sahan. My approach is highly relational and really fits within our broader kind of local government prioritization of trust building over time. So I'm coming in, again, already having built through my career in public service, a long list of local government supporters and officials from the region, not just from the city of Portland and Multnomah County, because we're going to need a regional approach and a regional way to tackle these shared issues. I do see that there will be a need to do some bridge building on common ground with sitting commissioners now in my next remaining couple years of this vacancy that I'm seeking to fill. However, this is not going to be an issue I don't perceive for the long term, because half of the current Multnomah County Commission is turning over. So they're termed out, districts 1 and districts 4. We're going to be needing new leadership. So my approach has been, and I'm already doing this, building the slate, building, recruitment training programs for those District 1 and 4 future commissioners, such that beginning in 2024, when we're running and when we get sworn in for the new term beginning in 2025, we have a majority, community accountable body of commissioners that can have a majority vote, doesn't need a tiebreaker, is trusted by community, has an approach that is highly community facing. My approach depends heavily on bringing the community at the beginning, not at the end, to rubber stamp initiatives. That's how we've gotten into a lot of trouble, I think, recently with some measures that have made it as far as they've made it, because they've not been truly inclusive enough from conception. So that's important to me. And making sure that we have pipelines for people who are interested in leadership, who have a lot to offer, but may not have traditionally seen public office as a viable next step for them. Making sure that we're providing training programs, opportunities for them to consider running and serving on a commission where we're going to need, at least half new commissioners in the future. Also, my approach is, taking a look at our relationships here regionally, community and public service, but also more broadly, regionally and nationally. Oregon, by design, much to our detriment, is very insular. If we're going to be able to envision what it is and what it can be to think on a bigger scale, a broader scale, a more disruptive scale, we're going to need to pull in from different parts of the country, parts of the world. That's not the traditional Oregon way, or this state was not designed in that way. So having leadership like mine and leadership from other sets of commissioners from diverse perspectives can help, say to people, okay, we don't have all the answers here in Oregon. We can't just be, super narrow in our scope and seeing, okay, what's happening here and in Eugene and in Bend. We have to actually say what's happening, in Chicago and in Denmark. Really think much more creatively about that. So that's consistently missing from conversations that I'm in. I'll seek to address that by having us think bigger, bringing more people into the fold for Districts 1 and 4, really making sure that we're all building collaborative relationships with the chair, with other regional leaders, and constantly coming back to you all and saying, how can we help create a joint strategy for getting people to move from where they currently are to where we know they can be and where we need them to be.
Thank you. Andy, you have your hand up.
Hi, Francis.
Nelson. Hi.
Thank you. Thank you so much for volunteering to moderate today. Appreciate it. Good to see everyone. I'm Andy Nelson, Executive Director, Impact Northwest. Psyched to partner up with like-minded organizations. Ana, great to meet you. Really like what I'm hearing today. Wanted to kind of punctuate the wage issue. Enough said about that. I appreciate what you're saying about taking the best ideas from around the world, around the country anyway. We are a little bit insular here. Mm-hmm. We got this sense of exceptionalism that we ought to be questioning. You are. I appreciate that. I to that point, you had asked for some ideas around housing and homelessness. And, one of the things that we talk about a lot, there's a group of us who meet every Monday at 4, and, we talk about these issues, is that this really hasn't been a united community in terms of a solution. We see a really different solution coming out of City Hall than what we're hearing from the chair's office. And we look at, not this is exact comparison, we look at places like Houston that have just doubled down on housing first. We've not been a housing first community. We've been maybe a shelter first community. And there's a role for shelter, we get it. But this idea that folks need a place to live, and then once they're there, the services can follow, seems to have a whole heck of a lot of evidence. But for some reason, I guess a bunch of reasons, we just haven't really done that here. And super curious. I don't know if I have a question here, but just wanted to put that out there, and love to hear if you'd like any reflections you have.
Thank you. I have been picking up on this sort of different approach to housing first or services first. I have to remind people, housing first is not housing only. It's housing first and then second, third, fourth. I think there needs to be really, truly reminding people what we mean by housing first. The information that I'm getting across the board says that no progress is going to be made on any health front unless people are housed and safe and have a roof overhead. And we know that from a common sense standpoint, we know if someone goes in for surgery at the hospital, the doctor's not going to release them if they don't have a place to sleep, if they don't have somewhere safe to go. So same thing for other kinds of invisible or non-physical types of ailments. People need a place, a safe, warm place to be, to recover. I would love to join current conversations that are ongoing about how I can best have a role in uplifting the importance of that. I would also like to be armed with some data points or things to be taking up to fellow commissioners and fellow leaders in response to criticisms about housing first. I find that I'm really making some headway in getting people to understand the importance of housing to undergird all other kinds of treatment. But when they come back with, I know there was a report out of California, their recent housing first efforts that I read that was highly critical of the approach. I want to be able to come in and say, okay, we read this, but also here's what we know about here in our communities and what's needed and what's worked and hasn't worked, and be able to just come out ahead of that with some solid information and data that helps. People love data, so you being able to give them something from my trusted point of view can go a long way.
Thank you. Ms. Del Rocio, I always want to make sure I say this right. Do you have any final words you would like to share?
Final words I'd like to share. I would say that for me, working at the county has been transformative, and this call to serve came at a time when it's going to be so critical what we set in response to COVID, and as we're recovering from COVID, what we set as the standards and the bar for what we're going to accept leading up to the next disaster, whatever it may be. As a mother raising 2 kids in my community, it's so important that I'm contributing to generational impacts and not just looking at my current block or my current home or my current monthly budget, but so much more beyond. And that's what has set me apart in my leadership since I've been here in Oregon. That's what sets me apart in my public service. And as the next Multnomah County Commissioner, I will continue to be looking much more broadly for East Portland through generations to thriving communities, thriving planet, and really making sure that input is for all District 3, not just the western portion, but also the eastern portion. You'll be hearing that repeatedly. I'm the only candidate that has shown up. I'm the only candidate that showed up to the East Portland Action Plan Candidate Forum. I'm the only candidate that showed up to the Division Midway Alliance Community Visioning Workshop. I have shown up time over time for East Portland, and I currently live on the western side of 205. So I can be and I will be the commissioner for the whole district. That's true for myself and my candidacy and only my candidacy. So I hope that you will keep that in mind. And I will really urge all of you, even though you cannot endorse or involve yourselves in campaigns in that way, you can, and I urge you to make sure people vote. Register to vote and vote. It's such an important way to be building civic engagement, be building electoral power. If and when anyone votes in the eastern part, or anyone who's unhoused, they can vote too. When they vote, they get on the rolls of voters who turn out, and they force any future candidate who runs to have to take into consideration their points of views, their voter turnout record. It really goes such a long way when people are remembered to have a voice, make that vote every single year, not just presidential and midterm years, but also we know that the governments that have the biggest role in our lives are the local government. So encourage your folks to vote as much as possible every single year. I'm open to questions and follow up. Thank you all so much for your perspective and your time.
Thank you, everyone, for